Before we go on to discuss about the origins of the state, let us first try to understand what is a state. Merriam-Webster defines state as a politically organized body of people usually occupying a definite territory, especially one that is sovereign. And according to this website Lumen Learning, link in description, a state is an organized political community acting under a government. States may be classified as sovereign if they are not dependent on or subject to any other power or state. And as an example, here we have the United States of America. Wait, so basically, a state is a country? So where did this idea of state come from? Why did humans choose to leave their old nomadic hunter-gatherer lifestyles and form something such as a state? There are three theories I'm going to go through, beginning with the theory of divine origin, then the social contract theory, and then the theory of force. Some others too, which I'll maybe discuss in a future episode. The theory of divine origin, which you can say is the oldest theory about the origin of the state. In short, it believes that state was established and ruled by God himself or some supernatural powers. This theory led to the tradition which went on for long that kings and their royal families were in some way chosen by God, and that the position of a king and the state was inherently divine. To quote Robert Filmer, an English political theorist who wrote in his book Patriarcha that present kings are or are to be reputed next to him, who's Adam by the way. The theory of divine origin was popular for a long time, but later on it began to decline due to many factors including atheism, scientific advancements, and also with the increasing popularity of the next theory, which is the social contract theory. The basic idea of this theory is that the state is the result of an agreement which was entered into by men who previously had no such thing as a governmental organization. There was no government, there was no law, every individual's actions were bound only by their personal power and conscience. The views of various philosophers differ, although they have this common idea that maybe the state of nature which man previously lived in was either too idyllic to last long or too inconvenient and unbearable for men to put up with, that they gave up their natural liberty, in part or in whole, to obtain the security and protection of the state. I'll highlight this theory through different versions of the same theory given by Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau. To begin with, Hobbes wasn't very fond of the idea that man was in any form a social animal. He writes in Leviathan, where he takes us back to the state of nature, before the state ever existed, that man in that state was selfish and self-seeking, where the normal state was the state of war, forcing men to live in a state of continuous fear. There was no law, no justice, no distinction between right and wrong, no notion of justice and injustice, and no distinction between good and bad. According to him, there was only force and fraud. So according to him, men entered into this contract where they gave up their right of governing themselves to this thing, which ultimately went on to become the state. The state which Hobbes presented was authoritarian, where man has no choice but to offer their complete obedience to the authority. Because they can't break this contract they agreed to in the first place for fear of degenerating back to their primitive state of chaos. While Hobbes was a firm believer that man in the state of nature was in a sort of hell, as they had no concept of right and wrong, Locke was a firm believer in the goodness of man. While Hobbes said that men entered into this agreement due to continual fear of the state of nature, Locke believed that men agreed to these contracts happily, just to preserve the quiet and comfortable life, without the small inconveniences existing in the state of nature. And you might have noticed, I said these contracts, not this contract. While Hobbes had this one contract that all people agreed to, Locke wrote about two contracts. One being the social contract which led to the formation of a civil society, and the other being the governmental contract leading to the formation of government. Locke also believed in a way similar to Hobbes that man ought to listen to the authority of the state. However, if the authority starts taking away the rights which man has always had, man ought to revolt. So we can say Locke was the first utilitarian and the first individualist. Rousseau believed that men in their primitive state lived a much better life than under the civilized society. He considered man to be a being of feelings who never thinks, and it is thought who corrupts a man. According to him, in the state of nature referred previously, every individual had unlimited liberty. There was no private property, no competition, and no jealousy. Every individual lived a free life where he knew neither wrong nor right and was away from all notions of vice and virtue. With the passage of time, however, things change in the state of nature. In the words of Rousseau, the first person who, having enclosed a plot of land, took it into his head to say, "This is mine," and found people simple enough to believe him, was the true founder of civil society. This civilization of human had not improved people, but had only led to the degradation of moral values, causing wars, death, and inequality. The only solution to this intolerable life was the social contract. According to him, everyone surrendered to the community all his rights, leading to the society becoming sovereign. However, also, man was no less freer under this social contract than he was in the state of nature. Rousseau provided many ideas about the idea of sovereignty, what constitutes law, actual will, general will, and more, which I might address in a future video on Rousseau alone. So the third theory is theory of force. According to this theory, the state is the result of force. It is the result of the subjugation of the weaker by the stronger, in other words, war/oppression. Oppenheimer advocated this theory of force as the origin of the state. Of course. The theory of force has been advocated from time to time by different institutions and individuals to serve their own ends. It was advocated by the Church during the Middle Ages with a view to prove its own superiority over the state. Other theories about the origin of the state include the patriarchal theory, the matriarchal theory, evolutionary or historical theory, etc., etc. However, to this day, no one actually knows how and when the state actually come into being. Before I end this video, I would like to include that a theory of force was in one way or the other integral to Karl Marx's idea about the origin of the state. Now I guess most of you know who this guy with the beard is, so let's discuss about this in the next video. See ya! Hey Vladimir, put on the music now, will ya?